and it's a pretty impressive sight.
I think it's quite cool.
Wow! That went right through me!
Click. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
It's 5 to 10, and with millions of you having cast your votes, the polls are about to close.
The arguments of the campaign are over. The counting is about to start. So, let election night begin.
A very good evening to you. Welcome to our election night studio, your destination for unrivaled coverage over the next 10 hours as we discover whom you've chosen to walk through that famous door in Downing Street.
Last time round, Boris Johnson was Prime Minister. Jeremy Corbyn led the Labour Party. We were still in the European Union and no one had heard of coronavirus.
Today, of course, the political landscape is very different and the leaders of all the main parties have changed. Sir Keir Starmer cast his vote this morning. Only 4 Labour leaders have ever been elected Prime Minister. Has he done enough to seal the deal with the British people? And can he lead Labour to its first victory in nearly 20 years?
Rishi Sunak is the 5th Tory Prime Minister in quick succession. He surprised the country with a snap election and has been fighting hard to hang on to power after the Tories' 14 years in charge. But can he cross Jeremy Vine's winning line outside number 10?
Every paving stone a parliamentary seat. You remember 2019 when Boris Johnson won all these seats and paved a path to the door of number 10. This time, can Labour turn the blue seats red and send Keir Starmer through that historic black door, or will the Conservatives hold them off?
This is the engine room of our election coverage, where we're keeping an eye on all the election centres right across the UK with an army of reporters. Fiona Bruce and Victoria Derbyshire are with the Labour and Tory leaders. And the race to deliver the first result is always fiercely contested. So we have our earliest risers on the hunt for the early declarers.
Hello, I'm in Blythe, where a recount in 2019 stopped them winning. But this time, this team is even more determined than ever. Do we think we can beat Sunderland this time?
Well, let's just see, shall we? Sunderland has won this race many, many times, and they're not giving up without a fight.
Here in London's Broadcasting House, our teams are poised, ready to gather and then verify every single result as they begin to come in. And of course, at the heart of it is Professor Sir John Curtice, who's been hard at work already all day with the exit poll team. And in just a few moments, we can legally reveal the results of all of those calculations.
That exit poll will indicate who will be heading here to the Commons, and Rita Chakrabarti will be checking all the numbers.
We're feeding all that data into the giant screen now, and in a few moments' time, I'll be able to tell you which seats are most likely to be changing hands.
If neither Keir Starmer nor Rishi Sunak win the magic 326 seats, could one of the smaller parties back them up? Ed Davey's Liberal Democrats would love to become the 3rd biggest party once again. Nigel Farage is back in frontline politics with Reform UK. And Kirsty Wark is watching the battle in Scotland.
I'm here in Glasgow, where we're expecting a night of high drama, with politicians using the results in Scotland to argue for or against independence. I'll be joined by the country's senior politicians, advisers and commentators to react to the big stories right through the night.
Ready for an avalanche of information and reaction? Our political editor, Chris Mason, is with us here in the studio.
So, we're seconds away from 10 o'clock and the exit poll. A first indication of how the night might unfold. More than 20,000 people took part on behalf of the BBC, ITV News and Sky in this first July election since 1945. 326 seats are needed to win. So, here we go.
And as Big Ben strikes 10, the exit poll is predicting a Labour landslide.
Sir Keir Starmer will become Prime Minister with a majority of around 170 seats.
The exit poll predicts that Labour will have captured 410 seats, adding 209. It suggests the Conservatives will have lost 241 MPs, landing on 131.
On to the other numbers. The Liberal Democrats up 53 on 61 seats. Reform on 13 seats. The SNP down 38 seats. According to this exit poll, on 10, Plaid Cymru are on 4, they're up 2, and the Greens are up 1 on 2.
All the pointers tonight are that Sir Keir Starmer is taking Labour back to power. Only the 5th Labour leader to win a general election. These are the first indications of what may unfold, but a moment of history beckons. Chris.
Blimey, just take a look and take in those numbers. The Conservative Party, so often an election-winning machine, looks pulverised tonight, taking in those numbers. At the last general election, it was Labour that was pulverised, reduced to its smallest number of seats since 1935. At the time, there was talk that Boris Johnson might serve as Prime Minister into the 2030s, and that for Labour to win by just a smidgen would require a Himalayan climb on their part. And yet you look at those numbers and they have won by a mile. What does this tell you? It tells us a lot about voter volatility. Like never before, more people in more places more often are more willing to change their minds about who they support from one election to another. That's why it looks like we went from a landslide last time for the Conservatives to a landslide for Labour this time. It is going to be quite the night.
And Chris, we should remind viewers there's a high degree of scepticism we should apply to this exit poll. They have a very good track record, but it's only over the next few hours that the results will come in and will tell us the real verdict of the British people. But it does seem, as it has done all the way throughout this campaign, that Sir Keir Starmer has done something extraordinary, pulling back Labour from where it was in 2019.
Astonishing when you look at the Labour numbers, given where they were, given the extent to which they had been so comprehensively beaten last time. There was lots of folk in lots of political parties anticipating that that would mean they'd be out of power for at least a decade. And yet you look at these numbers, and of course we should insert the caveat, shouldn't we? But given the margin of that Labour lead in the exit poll, there is plenty of scope for that to be out by a reasonable margin and Labour still to be heading for a very sizable, historically big majority. Where we should insert a few more caveats, shouldn't we, is around some of the smaller parties, not least the Scottish National Party, by dint of the SNP merely standing in Scotland. There are fewer data entry points into that exit poll, so there's a bit more caution around that. Similarly around reform as well. So some things to sort of mark our card in terms of caveats. But in terms of the big story, it looks very clear. And we overuse words like historic, don't we, occasionally in journalism. I'll plead guilty to that. But these numbers, if they are broadly in line with where we find ourselves by breakfast time, warrant that label.
Yeah, historic, seismic.
Yeah.
What a shift in the political tectonic plates. No question that the polls have been all over the place in terms of measuring the size of a potential Labour majority. But if this exit poll, for early indication, if it is right, we're talking about potentially Labour being in power into the 2030s.
Well, or not, because who knows if the equal and opposite might happen at that
Exactly.
at a next election. And the recent electoral history tells you that things can swing in all sorts of directions remarkably quickly. But to answer your question the other way, if you like, Clive, if you're a Conservative tonight absorbing these numbers, clearly they are bleak and point to a long, long way back if that's how the numbers stack up as the hours come. You know, the number of Conservative seats worst in a century. Labour broadly similar in terms of where they are majority-wise and indeed seats-wise, according to the exit poll from 1997. So to just give you some sort of historical metric, that's the zone we're in.
OK, Chris, thank you. We're going to be getting much more from you throughout the night, of course.
We will, and through the night we'll be joined by a parade of political guests. Some of them will be in jubilation. Some of them will be very much at the other end of the scale. We're joined initially by Lord Mandelson, who is, of course, one
already,
of the architects of the 1997 New Labour victory. And Steve Baker, the Conservative, who doesn't know yet whether or not he has held on to his seat in Wickham. And we will come to them in just a couple of minutes. But I want to remind you of these numbers as they have been revealed by the exit poll, showing Labour on 410 seats, having gained 209. The Conservatives crashing down to 131, losing 241. 61, the Liberal Democrats, an incredible performance for them if they are correct, on 53 seats. The SNP crashing down to 10, Plaid Cymru gaining 2, the Greens gaining 1, and the Reform Party gaining 13. You can just about see them coming onto the glorious prow of Broadcasting House here in the heart of London. But as Chris was saying, particularly when it comes to the smaller parties, we will insert lots of grains of salt at this stage. Small errors, small margins of errors in the exit poll could end up with very, very different tallies for them by the end of the night. So bear that in mind.
Yeah, health warnings will be the order of the night until we start getting the real results coming in. Hopefully the first result, possibly in the next hour, hour and a half. Who knows? Fingers crossed we'll be able to get that to you. Of course, if you're going to have a majority to Labour, according to the exit poll of 170, then that means a number of Labour gains, quite clearly. Right around the country, we're going to have a look at some of those that our psephologists suggest could be changing hands to Labour with a 95% level of certainty. Swindon South, Darlington, Rutherglen from the SNP. We already had the exit poll suggest the situation in Scotland there. Wrexham, Conservative, now potentially gone, according to our exit poll. Leon Atherton, Middlesbrough, Swindon North as well. And it's going to be very, very interesting indeed.
Well, let's go straight to one of the people who it looks like is heading for government. Angela Rayner is with us tonight from Ashton-under-Lyne. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Do you believe these numbers, Angela Rayner?
Well, the numbers are encouraging, but of course the exit poll is a poll, so we haven't had any results yet. I think Keir Starmer has done a tremendous job of transforming the Labour Party and putting forward a programme for government that I'm hopeful that people have got behind.
The numbers are a bit more than encouraging, though, for the Labour Party. I mean, you will have had thousands of activists out on the stump today, banging on doors, doing their own research with their clipboards, getting busy. Do your numbers at Labour HQ broadly match with what we've seen tonight?
Well, if you look at where we were in 2019, just to get a majority of one, we'd have had to have a swing greater than Tony Blair's in 1997. So we know a number of seats were on a knife edge from our own data. But I also know that all of our activists and our candidates have been going out there, not taking anything for granted, and speaking to the electorate about what they believe matters to them and the concerns that they've had. And I think that the thing that kept coming back to us was that the 14 years the Tories have been in power and the chaos that they've had to tolerate is that they wanted that change.
And we'll understand tonight why you're at this stage a bit reluctant to crack a smile. It's been Keir Starmer's watchword all the way through, is to tell you all you must not be complacent. And yet you might be able to hear Peter Mandelson chuckling along in the studio here as you are nobly emphasising that it still may be uncertain for you. So do you think that you are going to be Deputy Prime Minister by the end of the weekend?
Well, look, it'd be an absolute honour and a privilege to be re-elected, first of all, as the MP for Ashton-under-Lyne, but then to be in government as the Deputy Prime Minister. And the 9 years I've been an MP, I've not been able to effect change because we've been in opposition. So the ability and the opportunity to serve the British people and to bring about that change that they're desperate for would be an absolute privilege for me. But I'm not counting my chickens until we've got those results coming in.
Angela Rayner, Clive Myrie here. You're saying you're not counting your chickens. What kind of chickens might they be? What kind of chickens would you like to see in terms of a future job description in a Keir Starmer government?
Well, look, I've been dealing with the New Deal for working people. I want to see secure jobs for people. I want to see those 1.5 million homes that we've promised to be built. I want to support our local government colleagues and our communities and bring them closer together. And I want to serve in whichever way I possibly can, hopefully in a Labour government that can bring about that change they desperately need. And it will be a team effort. The Shadow Cabinet have been working well together, and the Labour team are very keen to make sure that we put country before party and that we serve in whichever way that Keir Starmer would like us to.
Angela Rayner, thank you so much. Bravely standing in the rain there in your own constituency. Thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Bit of a smile at the very end.
At the very end.
We all caught that. We all caught that. It is an exit poll. It's an early indication, but it is suggesting a landslide for Labour. We're waiting for the results to start coming in, and we have correspondents at more counts right around the country than any other broadcaster. So stick with us and analysing the results, getting a sense of how the evening is going to progress, is my colleague Rita Chakrabarti, who'll be feeding all that statistics and all the evidence into her giant screen there.
Exactly so, Clive. And I can bring you some of those forecasts. They are forecasts at the moment because it's an exit poll, but it is based on a balance of probability using data from the exit poll that we can calculate the probability of victory or loss in individual seats. And there will be some very well-known